Thank you so much. Brief introduction. I am a mentor here at Copenhagen FinTech, which is a great pleasure. It's also a pleasure being here today. I'm also a mentor at DTU, and then I'm a business angel, so that means that I invest into startups, and I'm an active investor, at least for the period where it's relevant with my competences. And the competences that I bring is from a very long career. I started as a lawyer, an M&A international lawyer, and then I went on to the financial sector where I was at executive level in open-ended UCITS funds. I continued into one of the most distressed banks during the bank crisis, where I was one of the managers to pull it through the crisis. And then I'd had enough of the financial sector. And then for the last 10 years, I have been doing my own investments or working together with others, buying up companies, exiting them, selling them, whatever. But also always with a focus on go-to-market strategy, sales, and organizational development of the company that I invest into. Focus on tech, of course, but also on the sale of services, as basically fintech is all about. So, which one of you gentlemen want to take over? Do you want to?
Thanks. Henry here. Sorry, a bit of a croaky voice, so please forgive me. It's not normally like this, but delighted to be here. Thanks to David and the team for having me here. From Leo Capital, so we're an early stage VC fund originating in Asia, actually headquartered out of Singapore. We have 3 funds over there, and now have recently launched a seed stage fund out of Helsinki. We're really looking at the early stage B2B segment and writing checks of up to 500k into startups from across the Nordics and wider in Europe. The story of Leo is very much has very much fintech at its heart. So the 2 co-founders are both actually Indian entrepreneurs and have built businesses themselves for the globe, but out of the markets in Asia. So a good example would be Pine Labs, which is a point-of-sale payments processing business built out of India, which has seen a huge amount of growth, beyond those borders. And our focus is really on finding great founders wherever they may be in the world, giving them access to the right talent across markets, and typically Indian tech talent, and then encouraging them to grow and scale internationally. And often that is into the US market, for where we see the greatest value for B2B software solutions. I used to be a lawyer as well, and then followed the light into first with Octopus Ventures into VC, and now with Leo Capital. Great to be here. Thanks.
Great. Hello, everybody. So I'm Mats. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Lunar Bank. Been with Lunar for about 4 years, but in total I spent about 20 years in the payments and banking landscape. Thank you guys very much for coming out here into our beautiful location, and thanks to Copenhagen FinTech for also arranging this in this is our largest office. We don't talk about it as our head office, but definitely the largest office of Lunar Bank. We are a Nordic digital challenger bank. So those of you who are looking to cash the checks that my panelists here are writing, then of course you need to make sure that you have a business account with Lunar Bank. We have about 20% market share of newly started businesses in Denmark, gunning for the same level of penetration in Sweden. In total, about 1 million customers across the 3 Scandinavian countries, and growing at a very rapid pace. So if you haven't tried us out, then do so, or think about it for your next ventures that you guys are setting up. But great to be here. Let's get into the discussion.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think this is still working. All right, so I guess just a simple exam question for starting off. Andre alluded to it in the sort of intro about the success of the Nordics, 27 million people. But a lot of people see it as punching above its weight, right? It's produced quite a lot of unicorns. And I guess the first question from me would be, why do we think that is the case, right? What is so special about the Nordics that develops these sort of unicorns, these great companies, considering its size, right? Maybe Ulla, you can start.
I think one of the characteristics about the Nordics is that we have a very high level of trust between each other, but also to our state. Coming from Denmark, it seems so obvious, but whenever I travel and talk to people outside the Nordics, I'm always a bit shocked about the skepticism there is towards the state and the government. So I think that's one really important issue. Also, another one is that I think we, to be fair, have had a pretty decent regulatory environment. There's been a lot of strong will to make this possible within the Nordics. And then obviously also that we are very keen on using new technologies, the digital, whatever comes our way, we'll all pick it up at all levels in society. It's not just an elite that wants to work with the new digital opportunities, but it's an integrated part of our society. So it's also a very interesting kind of more democratic, social, democratic, thank you, yeah, aspect in this. I think is very interesting. Do you want to add something?
I would echo absolutely all of that. I think certainly in terms of that sort of digital penetration, digital adoption, the Nordics are a great example of that. I think it's easy to underestimate, and many people in this room I know who've spent a lot of time traveling around the world, it's very easy to underestimate the value of two things. The ease with which people speak English, number one, and everyone here puts us to shame as Brits in terms of the language abilities. And the strength of the institutions. Speaking as an ex-lawyer, that the rule of law, the confidence that people get from knowing that your IP, your data, the enforceability of your contract rights is meaningful here in a democratic context is really important. But the most important thing of all is the talent. So just really the strength of the quality of the talent that comes through, the strength of the education system, and the engineering talent in particular. Is the killer app, if you like. So I think there's a blend of those factors that's absolutely key.
Yeah, and I think just, finishing off on that, I think the talent is important for sure, right? And I also think we have a long history in the region because labor costs are so high just to fund the welfare state in which we live, right? And therefore we also have a long history of substituting capital for labor in the sense that we apply technology to solve business problems to reduce production cost. And we've done so very successfully in farming, in industrials, and it's no surprise then in pharmaceuticals, no surprise that then also gets applied into finance, right? It's just a natural extension of how we live and how we operate in the region, I think.
Yeah, I think you mentioned talent a couple of times, and I think the thing for me, I've been here 7 years, right? I don't speak Danish, it's embarrassing, but it's typically British, yeah, there we go. But I think the one thing I've noticed is the education system, right? It's very different here, right? It's a lot more at an early age, it's a lot more collaborative, it's a lot more outside the box thinking. In the UK, it's very much you do as we say, and that's follow the rules. So I don't know, I think that has a big impact on the talent thing from my point of view, is you educate people into thinking differently. I don't know whether you've experienced that, but maybe from a talent perspective, that's something you can comment on.
Yes, but I also think that we have to be a bit self-critical about that. I'm a Dane, so I'm always a bit skeptical.
Right.
I think one of the things is that we don't really have an elite, or if we do, it's usually not Danish within the universities. So
Okay.
I think we definitely have an issue with being innovative and being maybe more. I think we could pick something up from maybe you Brits, but also definitely from the US, as to being more focused on the very few very good people that we have. So I think it also has a downside that we have this very broad mentality, and as you all know, we have an issue with not being innovative enough in the EU and also in the Nordics. So it's we're a bit copycats a lot, I think, to some extent. Is that unfair?
I refuse to be negative about it. I won't be. I think of course there are challenges, but I think so much of it is about the mindset. And obviously there's a big debate in the UK, isn't there, around the innovation piece. There's a big debate around, yes, we have got some great educational institutions, but there's a fear that the world is coming to the UK, getting educated and then taking all the value outside. And that also flows through to a lot of the debate, which I'm sure we'll come on to, around the startups and value exiting Europe as a whole and the Nordics, to go to the US and elsewhere. But what I will say in defence, I think, of the Nordics, and it's also true of Singapore, where I spent many years, is the relatively small size of the market does force people to think globally. It does force people to quickly contemplate, where do I go from here once I've got my basic concepts nailed down? How do I take it forward? I think that's reflected in the data, which, as I understand it, the value, if you look at SaaS in this region, the value of the SaaS and the SaaS sales that are generated from this part of the world is double the demand locally, and that's expected to triple by 2030. So as a net exporter, obviously you have to sell it, to find the home for that, and that requires you to think globally. So I think, whilst that is true, that dare I say it, Viking spirit is still alive and well.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I usually say that it's a super good test market, but that's what it is. It's a very small market. It's a very small population. Even if we count everyone in the Nordics, it's still a very small number. So I think it's a good test market, and I always challenge both investors and companies that they make sure that that is their attitude from the beginning, so that they have exactly what you mentioned, the global outlook from the beginning, having international people on their team from the beginning. And I think that is beautifully reflected here in Copenhagen FinTech. So I think it's the right way forward.
Okay. And Mads, what the talent objective in Luna? Like, where are you seeing your talent coming from? Like, is there a trend? Is it Danish? Is it international? What is the trend you see?
Yeah, I think it's just about finding and hiring the best talent for the job, right? And I think we have a massive benefit in the sense that since we have offices here in Copenhagen, we have offices in Aarhus, we have offices in Stockholm, right? So we have a massive talent pool to fish in. Obviously, there's, as you say, there's a lot of international talent in Copenhagen. That's fantastic. There's a lot of sort of niche specific talent in different sub-segments of both tech, but also payments and other areas, depending on whether you go to Aarhus or Stockholm. So I think we have an opportunity to really search wide and broad. And we also see people that actually are open to just moving into one of these cities for joining companies that are on a really exciting trajectory like Luna is. So I think it's also a massive benefit actually being in the region, that it is regarded as attractive, safe, stable, which means that actually talent is open to also coming into the region and not just fishing in the talent pool that is here.
And it was interesting to hear you say that you don't refer to this as your head office, right? And I guess that reflects in your comments, right? You have talent all over the Nordics, basically.
Yeah, but I think it's an opportunity for us to be able to source the best talent, depending on what the job is that needs to get done. But I think there's another interesting observation just in terms of what are different countries good at, right? Because it's also easy when we talk about how the Nordics as a region, or the Nordics and Baltics even, as you guys do from a Tenety standpoint, right? There is still also a historical legacy in terms of who, there's a lot of depth in design competence and how to craft great experiences with products, but also with digital products in Denmark. I think there's a lot of historical engineering competence that goes very deep in Sweden, also in Finland and the Baltics. So, you do also see some variations a little bit depending on which country you go into. Where can you find some really unique talents that totally stand out? So I think that's also something to think about as you look at how do you scale across the region.
Okay, and you said you've been at Luna 4 years, so it kind of lines nicely with my next question. So, having said all that, what do you think have been the key factors to success for Luna over the last 4 or 5 years in the Nordic ecosystem? Like, what do you think stands out for you, like in your time that you've been there? Like the key moments, the key pieces.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think it's one of the amazing things in working in a scale up is that the achievements sort of really vary over time. And as you hit a milestone, it's not like you really celebrate that for a long time. I mean, it's nice on the day you hit the milestone that, okay, finally we made it. But then, because you're looking to scale and you're looking to go on that growth trajectory so fast, that also means that you don't have a lot of time to sort of celebrate the fact that, okay, we did this. You just have to immediately move on to the next thing and the next thing, and you're kind of really never satisfied or never happy about, you know, where you got to. You just want to get to the next place, right? And but with that said, I think looking at where we are, there's, you know, obviously a bunch of critical things in our journey. As a regulated business, of course, becoming a fully licensed bank was super important. That's a massive achievement for us because it unlocked all of the market potential that we were looking to pursue in the region. So that's, of course, massive for us. Then I think we've seen a massive shift over the last few years in terms of shifting away from just user growth to value growth and value creation. And that's been something that's been amazing for us, is to identify the opportunity to actually pursue delivery of more value to our users, and also have the confidence in charging for that value, so that we can monetize and deliver that value back also to our investors and shareholders. I think those are a couple of the learnings for us that have been super important. Just making sure that we have the license to operate, and then making sure that we can also monetize on that.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. As someone looking from a Dane, looking from outside in, like what is your view on sort of Luna's growth, where it's gone to, where it is now? Like, have you got an opinion on like something that stood out for you within that journey?
I'm deeply impressed. When you started, I mean, I used to work in a traditional bank, so when you started, I just thought, oh, good luck. This is really, it's going to be a really, really difficult journey for you guys, but I think that you've done excellently. And I think it's been, I'm so impressed. And I actually have, I think at least 2 startups that are your customers. Only 2, but you don't know how many investments I have, so it's, yeah. But anyway, no, I'm impressed by it, because it's really difficult to start and run a bank. I know, because as I said, I was working with one during the crisis, so I really know it the hard way. So I'm impressed, because I thought in the beginning it would just be more or less of a marketing gimmick for Nykredit. So they were, okay, here we go, it's just a gimmick. But it turned out to be a serious bank. So I'm proud of you guys.
And Henry, do you have you come from slightly wider field, so the view on Luna from your outside perspective?
I think it's great to you know, to see the proof point around the opening up of the sector. You know, I think you're looking from the sort of Asian perspective into Europe, and seeing how perhaps the full realization of the open banking initiative hasn't always been happened as fast as one would have wanted. But you know, it's examples such as Luna that really do demonstrate that it can be done, and I'm sure there's more to come as well. So I think that's really encouraging. Yeah.
And sticking to the time theme, I mean, when I founded and ran my own company many years ago, it didn't seem like there was a level of support that there is now in the ecosystem. I think it'd be just worth commenting on that. Like, how have things changed for startups in like the last 5 years? Like, what has changed that's sort of helped that growth maybe, or help companies come with ideas through to the scaling into international regions? Is there something that stands out for you that's changed?
Do you want to talk to the Danish ecosystem?
Yeah, I can try. Well, actually, I said it before, because my initial thought was, oh, good luck, it's not going to happen. I wouldn't think that today. So things have definitely changed, and it's more, as you said, accommodating. And I think there's a more open mindset to. But we started when I started seriously looking into fintech. I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I don't know. It was very much a disruptive mindset. We need to disrupt the sector. And coming from the sector, I think that's nice. It does need some disruption, but it's also a sector that's very sensitive. It plays a crucial role in our societies, so please don't disrupt it too much. I hear less and less of the disruption, and I kind of like that, because it's still disruptive, because you're doing new stuff and you're doing new things, but it's not top of the agenda anymore, and I think that's good. I think it's good for fintech, and I think it's good for the sector as such. So there is a kind of maturity from break things, or whatever was the attitude at that time, which doesn't work with the financial sector at all.
Mads?
Yeah, maybe I can just challenge that a little bit, right? Also working in the sector, because I think, you know, there's never a better time than today to start a new company, because otherwise you're just going to go around thinking about it. When should I do it? You know, you should always just do it now. There's never a better time. I think the reality is that, you know, if we look at the state of affairs now, there's just such an immense amount of tools, of support, of programs like the one that is being described here today, that really makes it a lot more. You have access to, I'm not saying it's easier, that's the wrong way of putting it, but it just makes it a lot more accessible to leverage on resources that help propel you on your journey. I think with the growth of AI, that's also massive, right? Because you can look at automating so many things. It has a massive impact on our business, but I think it will have a massive impact on, you know, all of the industries, but especially in tech overall, that, you know, you can leverage that to really push your cost of operating down and focus more on actually running your business. So I think and then I think from a financials perspective specifically, there is something, I will agree, in the disruption part, but I think that also stems from the fact that there's just so much more fundamental regulation in place now, that if you're looking to get into the fintech space, there's just so many avenues that you can pursue that are now more clear from a regulatory perspective, which would make it easier for your company to carve a clear path, to acquire the right license, to actually be able to be fundable and investable, because it's something that you can actually explain to your investors that it fits within a framework that is actually okay. So I think there's really lots and lots of opportunity, and, you know, as maybe we over-regulate in Europe, you were touching on that a little bit, but it also helps in a way in the fintech space, because there's a lot of exciting routes that are actually opened up now with the advent of more regulation in the financial sector, just creating some more order.
The regulation piece, I was going to come on to that later, but now you've mentioned it. There's been lots of narrative about differences between the US and Europe, and which framework is better. Is one more relaxed than the other? Is Europe over-regulating? Have we got a problem here? Seen lots of clips on business channels, on YouTube and the likes. But what's your take on that? Is it a fair narrative to say that Europe's over-regulating and that US is kind of more relaxed in the way?
Should I just start since I have the mic? So I think there is the regulatory burden is just massive, right? And we can argue about, is that right or not? And I think that's maybe more of a political question. It just makes it very hard and very expensive to run the business. That's extremely clear, and that pushes prices up for consumers and businesses and reduces value for the economy overall, right? So that's not a great thing. On the other hand, there are now also opportunities if you look at things like the MiCA regulation, or if you look at instant payments regulation. Those also open up massive opportunity for fintechs, because it makes things like crypto more mainstream, and you can now look at how do you deploy things like blockchain technology in a regulated environment to actually create more new services and more value for the end user. So there's some significant opportunities that also open up in that, I think. I don't know what your guys' perspective is from a sort of investability perspective.
Let's hear what the lawyers have to say.
Oh, love this one. Yeah, this is great. How long have we got? So I think, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of soul searching that goes on in Europe about this, because, and we've had obviously, you know, whether it's Donald Tusk, Ursula von der Leyen, everyone, you know, starting to, and Macron, of course, starting to be much more overt in tackling some of the preconceptions and perhaps encouraging people to be a bit less negative about it. I agree that having the structures is really helpful. The UK's, we were just talking about this earlier, the UK's position now I think is quite intriguing, because they've, having taken a step out, somewhat tripped over itself and fallen out of Europe, not really thinking it through, but let's leave that to the side for the minute. Now has an opportunity potentially to do something quite interesting in being lighter on regulation, more market driven in the way it approaches things. Whether it will achieve that and do it successfully, who knows? But it does have that opportunity, and Europe also has proven that it can do it. And I think if we fast forward 5 years from now, may well demonstrate that actually surprise everyone on the upside in the ability to do that. As you mentioned, MiCA coming through, you see the combination of the regulatory horizon and then people starting to really think, okay, how will that allow me to unlock value, for example, in crypto, through the Lightning Network, through accelerating payments, through finding ways of unlocking all of that value that's currently in the system. So it's almost, you know, think of the market potential first. How do I address an addressable market here in a way that's meaningful? Yes, that requires, I'm afraid, probably some lawyers. It requires a little bit of thinking around how's that directive going to get implemented market by market. But actually, if you're the right kind of founder, you'll blast through those barriers. You'll find ways of prioritizing, and you will build the solution that takes advantage of that opportunity in the market. So see it as a potential defensive moat for you as a business, as to something that just gives you an excuse to give up. There'll always be excuses to give up. Regulation's another one, but what you won't do is deliberately, particularly now, I think, look to stifle that opportunity. So I'd take the regulatory thing as a challenge and a means to build a defensive moat around what you're doing, rather than something that's an additional burden.
Well, I completely agree. And I'm sorry to say to you, Brits, that I have a strong hope that the EU will find a way to diminish the differences between the countries, so that we will have more of a concerted European market. I think we're on our way, but it can definitely get better. For me, it's always a bit funny when people say that the US is deregulated, because anyone who's trying to do business in the US has tried to do business in the US would know that you have to look into the different regulations in each state if you want to work across the US. So it's really, really complicated and a bit scary, to be honest. I always said no to entering the US for that. That's one reason anyway. But I think that is our opportunity in the EU, that we should be more coordinated, and I think we're heading the right way. How do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that.
Great. Okay. Let's switch focus a little bit. It's coming from something you said earlier about company accounts, but leading into that question and blatant advertising, because we recently did a Nordic FinTech report where we highlighted trends and the likes across the various countries, technologies, trends, and one of the things it showed was that B2B was dramatically on the rise, right, in terms of focus. And you mentioned before, you joked about have company accounts in Luna, but it'd be really good to understand from an SME perspective, what is the priority of SME sort of features and functionality? And I guess, do you agree with the B2B trend in terms of it's rapidly growing, right?
Yeah, so B2B, absolutely. I think what a lot of startups and scale-ups have recognized is that in the quest of monetizing more on the investments that you make in your business and scaling your business, there's just a higher willingness to pay and a greater monetization potential to a large extent in B2B plays. So I think that drives one shift towards B2B. It was great to do nice consumer-focused value propositions when funding was more easily available, but faster monetization comes in B2B. So I think that's one significant value, I think, in it. And then I think from our own perspective, it's also an amazing opportunity to be able to serve micro businesses and scale ups, because one, of course, it helps the economy overall. That's every large company starts as a small company. But also it's actually an area where the cost to serve is incredibly high for legacy banks, and that creates opportunity for companies with more efficient stacks to step in, like Lunar, and actually provide a better service at a much lower operating cost. So it's also a very financially logical thing for us to do.
And let's ask the angel and VC investor.
I completely agree, and it is my experience from running small and medium-sized companies that it is so tiresome to work with the traditional banks. Either you're with a very local bank that would love to offer your services, etc., but it's really, really expensive, or you're with one of the big banks and they don't really care about you. So there is definitely a gap in the market, and I think it's very important, if we could just be a bit meta, that we in Europe do whatever we can to make our small and also micro companies, small, medium-sized companies grow, because that is where we've always grown from. We all in Denmark love to talk about Novo, etc., but it's not really where our growth originally came from. So we need to make the best term available for these medium-sized companies in the EU. So there is definitely a gap in the market. So thank you.
Well, we're B2B investors, so we've definitely drunk the Kool-Aid on that one. And I think having partners, including banking partners, who understand that is critical, particularly as we're seeing I mean, we come from the legal industry, and that's probably the slowest of all to adjust to sort of the fully digitized world. And whatever's coming down the track next for us, whether it's agentic AI or swarm agentic AI that we're all looking forward to next year, whatever it may be. But I think the speed with which you're seeing, fully integrated, embedded finance in so many different ways now is really exciting, and it's very hard to fully realize some of those opportunities if you're working with partners and advisors who are still working in the 19th century, frankly. So for me, that's a bit of a no-brainer. Can I get some kind of fee from Luna for saying that?
Yeah, me too. Can we get a t-shirt?
Yeah, we'll set you up. We have an affiliate program for you guys.
So Henry, it's time to put you on the spot a little bit. Yeah. So you said in various comments that Indian founders, Singapore, you mentioned Finland,
Yep.
and I'm just interested. Like you've told me before the panel, Nordic is a focus for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why exactly is that? I know we've raised a lot of points here, but in particular, like, what for you and your company? Why is it the Nordic focus?
Again, it comes back to talent. I mean, I think it's quite simple. If we're in the talent game in terms of the VC early stage VC game is a talent game. It's very simple. We see as we briefly discussed already, very high quality education system producing people who are ready-made, world-class engineers often. Now there may not be the entire team sitting neatly in one city, but that's where our thesis is all around thinking globally, both in terms of talent, plugging gaps in the team sheet as teams are scaling. Part of that is down to technology, actually, as you said, but equally there is often some interesting opportunities to bring in world-class tech talent from other markets. We would say, of course, India being top of that list, and then thinking globally in terms of markets as well, and going to elsewhere, not just in Europe, but also in the US. So as I said before, we see some parallels with Singapore. Now, India's different, of course, 1.4 billion people. Singapore, 6 million. But if you look at Singapore, then again, it's that idea around if you're building a business, you're going to exhaust your local market very quickly. You have to think globally. So I do believe that that's something that is prevalent in this part of the world. When you combine that with the ability to have people just do what they say they're going to do, again, that sounds such a simple thing, but people are pretty well disciplined in terms of the business environment. Our own experience in terms of we're backed by the government in Finland, and the experience we had with them was very straightforward, very transparent, and very easy. So all of these factors all combined to make it just a compelling opportunity. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a lack of confidence. I think people in this part of the world don't know how good they are. A lot of what we're trying to do is to challenge people and say, you are world class, in fact, in terms of the talent. I know it's scary in terms of going overseas. I know it's scary in terms of building a global team, looking at global markets, but you can do it, and others have done it. So we want to find those, diamonds in the rough who are prepared to take that risk and dive in, and we're here to help them do that.
Okay, before I hand over to you, one loaded question for you. Do you see a need for, when companies get to a certain size, to leave the Nordics? Like, in terms of, we see a lot of companies here that grow to a certain size and then they move to the US or they move to another part of the world, right? Do you see a need to do that, or is it from a VC perspective?
From a VC perspective, we're looking to build billion-dollar companies. It's hard to do that without leaving your home market. So I think you don't have to lose the essence of who you are as a company. I think as we've already discussed with Luna, that's almost a labeling issue in some ways. The DNA of the company and the cultural DNA of the company can remain very much Nordic without it, without taking advantage of market opportunities elsewhere. So I think as you keep that in mind, then I think there should be the opportunity to both scale well beyond the size of your current market. It's happening anyway. The Nordics is a net exporter of B2B SaaS, so it's all about that mindset, I think.
Mats, you got something?
No, but I would just add that it also comes back a little bit to the cultural predisposition of how we work in the region, because we built our wealth on, in Denmark, basically brewing beer and farming pigs. Excuse me, I'm not Danish, right? But and then selling that outside of a home market, right? Swedes are equally simple. We chop down trees and dig out minerals, and then we sell those outside of our home market. And now we're just building software and exporting that outside of our home market. I mean, we've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's just a natural extension and evolution of that, I think.
Ulla, have you done a lot of angel investments? What's your view?
On
So just on investments in general in Denmark, right? In terms of opportunities, in terms of are there good companies out there that you're seeing, you're interested in? What do you advise them? Just general state of the investment market, right?
Yes, I definitely see, as I said before, a higher quality. I also think it's a bit out of my league, most of it, because I'm just a business angel. So it's more for guys like Henry, I think.
What ticket size would you normally do?
500,000 Danish would be a start,
right?
Which is pretty high for a Danish business
it is.
angel.
Yeah.
So it's just to say, it's not really. I don't think it's really suited for business angels. And anyway, not in Denmark. Maybe more in Sweden. I have an impression that there are higher sums in Sweden. But again, it's one of the issues in Denmark that we don't. No, I'm wrong. No, same thing.
Danish is like a lot of Swedish.
Oh yes, many million. I know. No, but it's difficult to raise big money in Denmark. I mean, that is our issue, as you said before, David. That we have this tendency when our companies grow, we're not able to fund them anymore. And I honestly don't understand why, because I know the money's there. There's a lot of money, but it kind of stops at around, sorry for being Danish, 100 million Danish kroner or something. And that's really weird. I don't know why, but it's a mystery to me. I think you might have the same issue there is the same issue in Sweden, but it's a higher sum. So it's kind of our challenge. That's why we need you guys.
And Henry, anything to add on the scaling side of things in terms of the size of tickets and where that can come from and how we can attract more sort of scaling investments?
Yeah, well, I would say, obviously the angel communities and the friends and family networks are absolutely critical part of the ecosystem. So we can't do our job unless you do yours. So I think that's totally interdependent. We're writing 500k tickets here, talking in euros, in this part of the world. So we're still, pretty early stage. Our funds in Asia can write checks up to 2 million. But we're writing still, very early stage tickets, and we're really encouraging people to, and challenging people to then, really think carefully about how do you want to scale? It's different in consumer, but in B2B you can be more ambitious. So that's our whole piece is around challenging people to think globally, and then navigating through the roadmap to get you there. So, we would probably more than many investors suggest that you think about that much sooner. Because once you've started to think in those terms, then it does change how you think about your talents and your markets. So, again, we're not going to suggest you do, exhaust all the opportunities in Europe before you look to the US, for example.
Okay, and Mats, just one question for you. And in terms of Luna's scaling strategy, right, where do you see the next big sort of region for you guys, right? Where is that?
No, but I mean, we've always said that our home market is the Nordics, and I think that very much remains the case. I know we're talking here about the fact that it's a small region. On the other hand, the Nordics is the most profitable banking landscape in the world. Each individual country is dominated by 1, 2, 3, up to 4 large banks that are making obscene amounts of money, and if you calculate on a per capita basis, it's just completely excessive. And as a consequence, there's a lot to play for, and therefore our strategy is still, okay, how do we go deep in each of the countries here? And once we have proven that model should be easily scalable to then take outside of our home region. The EU is a lot simpler more broadly if you're talking about the Eurozone, because it's just a lot easier to operate in because it's the same currency. But if we can do it here, we should be able to make it anywhere.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I'm sure Andre's going to start waving at me any second soon. But I do want to do a little bit on the future, right? I do want to have a little look at like what regions, so we say the Nordics is, you know, successful, but what regions should we also be looking at for inspiration? Like where can we derive some you know, ideas from, some views from, like what regions do you think we should be looking at?
So just very quickly, I think the UK is just immensely impressive from a fintech perspective. I think there's just a massive depth of talent and a huge great access to capital that just makes London especially a really interesting place for fintech. I think for payments also you see massive evolution in places like India, Brazil and places like that. So I actually think we have a lot to learn also from emerging markets if you're looking to operate in the payment space.
Yeah, I think there are some really interesting sort of leapfrog technologies, etc., coming from emerging markets and from Asia. To give an example, we've got a portfolio company in London, a Turpay, that's using QR code payments to circumvent a lot of the large sort of fees that otherwise merchants would be subject to, also simplifying things for consumers. That's borrowed straight from the Asian markets, and I think it's those kinds of ideas that can really help.
Okay, and then final question from me. Is there any, and I guess this is probably geared towards you, Henry, a little bit, in terms of, is there any key businesses or technologies you're very focused on at the moment?
We keep a reasonably open mind. I think we're always interested in looking at the crossover opportunities where we're seeing you know, particular trends coming through in other industries. So as I say, I think there are some legacy businesses where for example, in travel, where you've got a lot of sort of repeat manual processes, you've got a large addressable market, and an ability to embed financial solutions in that space, for example, that are quite exciting. You know, I think a lot of people are talking about transformative use of you know, agentic solutions to really, you know, change how vast swathes of manual processes are currently done. And of course, I think with Mika coming up, you know, in the blockchain crypto space, and of course what's happened across the pond, which everyone's looking at quite closely, it could be quite interesting on that front as well. But I think we're keeping an open mind, really looking for the great founding teams who will then, you know, bring the ideas to us as well. We're being a bit lazy like that.
Okay. Ula, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I always find it interesting when people present solutions that are to the boring processes, the back office processes. Because I remember being an executive that was killing everyone. We had so many people occupied doing those processes. They were very inefficient and very difficult to get a hold on. So I think the little less sexy things, but again, as you said in the beginning, the whole LLM AI is also going to be very interesting. I think the supercomputer we have here in Denmark is going to open some really interesting opportunities, and I look forward to seeing cases where people dive into that opportunity. I think it's really good, super interesting.
Slightly varied question for you on the same theme, but as a commercial person in Luna, which technology are you most excited about? Which do you think will generate the most value for Luna?
But I would think about the value generation. I think Ulla is definitely onto something. I think the value generation is, you got to break it into two parts. One is just creating value by eliminating, you know, unnecessary cost so that you can invest back in your product. I think now we have, you know, more than half of our customer service interactions is handled by AI. That just takes out a massive amount of cost that we can reinvest back in the product and deliver a better product back to our customers. And as a matter of fact, customers are still saying that they had a fantastic service experience and interaction with us, in spite of the fact that it was just with basically a robot. So, you know, I think that's something that creates a lot of value creation opportunity. And then we haven't even started scratching the surface on how do we deploy AI to actually enhance the interaction with us and how we present certain services or certain offers or other things. So I think, you know, we have a lot to learn in this space.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I would just like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank Luna again for hosting. And I think Andre is going to be happy because we're on time. So.